There are roads in the Appalachian Mountains that don't show up on any map, paths that lead to nowhere, or worse, never let you leave. People vanish without a trace. Dash cams cut to black, phones go dead, and those who make it out, they never come back the same. Tonight, you're about to hear true stories from drivers who ignored the signs, who followed detours they shouldn't have, and who came face to face with something they can't explain. Welcome to Creepy Souls. Subscribe now and drive carefully. I left the interstate around 3:40 p.m. GPS said the mountain back road would save me 30 minutes getting to Knoxville. The sun was already dipping low behind the ridge, painting long gray shadows across the pavement. It was the kind of quiet you only get in the Appalachians. No cars, no planes, just the wind sifting through the trees like an old whisper. About 10 minutes in, the fog rolled over the road like a slow tide. Not mist, not haze, fog, thick and low. I turned on my headlights and dropped to 20 miles an hour, squinting through the windshield. It came fast. Within minutes, I couldn't see beyond my hood. My high beams only lit up a wall of white. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel tighter. My mouth had gone dry. I passed a wooden sign, barely visible. Black Hollow Ard. Didn't remember seeing that on the map. There were no houses, no barns, no turnoffs, just endless double yellow lines cutting through pale silence. The fog muffled the world. Trees stood like shadows on either side of me, huge, unmoving. I drove slow and waited for the next mile marker. It never came. After 15 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen one since the fog began. I'd passed. Two earlier, one marked 17, the other 16. I kept an eye out for 15, it never showed. Instead, the road looked identical. Same shape, same curve, same slant. The pavement was cracked in the same spot just before the slight bend. I thought I was imagining it at first. Fatigue, maybe. But when I saw the same crushed soda can lying near a storm drain for the second time, my gut turned. I pulled over, shut off the engine. The silence was total. I rolled the window down. The air was damp, cold. I could smell rot, not strong, just faint like wet leaves in the start of mold. I listened. Nothing. No birds. No wind. I checked my phone. No signal. I turned around. The U-turn was tight. The shoulder had narrowed. Odd. I didn't remember it being that tight. I eased the car back onto the road and started heading the way I'd come. Except, it didn't feel the same. The trees now leaned in closer. The road felt thinner. The fog thicker. I slowed again, watching for that same soda can. The same cracked stretch of asphalt. Nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Still no mile markers. Still no turnoffs. I hit the brakes when I saw it. A mailbox. Rusty, leaning sideways. No house. Just the mailbox and a thin gravel path leading into the woods. The mailbox door was hanging open, swinging slightly. No name. Something in me told me to keep driving, but I didn't. I parked. Not sure why. Maybe just needed a break. Maybe I thought someone lived up that path. Maybe I didn't like the idea of driving further into fog that didn't make sense. Grabbed my flashlight from the glove box and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots. The woods swallowed sound. Even my own footsteps felt distant. The mailbox had nothing in it, just cobwebs and dirt. The gravel path led uphill into thick trees, where the fog turned darker. I didn't go far, maybe 50 feet. Just enough to see a roofline through the trees. An old cabin, one story, wooden siding, windows dark. It looked abandoned. The porch sagged. The railing was half missing. The front door hung open just a few inches. I should have turned back right then. But instead, I walked closer. I told myself I'd just take a quick look. If someone was home, maybe they could tell me where I was, or at least let me use their landline. But the cabin was silent. The door creaked louder than I expected when I pushed it open. The smell hit first. Mildew, dust, something faintly sour beneath it. The kind of smell that settles into places when they've been forgotten a long time. Inside, the light was gray and washed out. The windows were fogged from the outside. Floorboards sagged slightly underfoot, but didn't creak. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling. One corner had an old stone fireplace, unlit. There were still things inside. A pair of old boots near the door, a chipped mug on the table, a folded flannel shirt over the back of a chair. I walked into the kitchen. Plates were stacked beside the sink. Dust covered everything. No sign of life. No fresh food, no water. But nothing was broken either. It looked paused, like someone had meant to come back and never did. I stepped into the hallway. There was only one bedroom. The bed was made, with a thin wool blanket tucked tight. A framed photo sat on the dresser, a man standing beside the same cabin, much younger. No date.
No name. Beside it was a small notebook. I picked it up. Inside, the handwriting was shaky but readable. Some entries were detailed, notes about weather, daily tasks, but the tone shifted. One entry just read, "Fog came again. Same time. Every
time." Nothing beyond it, no signal, no sound. Another 2 pages later. I turned back. Road was wrong. Can't explain it. Trees different. No signs. Just forest. My hands went cold. The final entry. I tried to walk out. Didn't work. It turns you around, brings you back. I'm writing this so I don't forget who I am. The last line. If you found this on leave, before it's too late. I dropped the notebook. That's when I heard it. A soft thud outside. Then a scrape. I froze. Moved to the window and looked out. Nothing. But the fog was thicker now. Pressed, right up against the glass. I backed out of the room, heart pounding. The silence was unbearable. My own breath sounded too loud. I reached the front door and stepped out onto the porch. My car was gone. I stared at the spot where it had been. Gravel untouched. No tire marks. Just wet moss and the trees. I ran. I don't remember how far. I just kept following the gravel path, hoping I'd reach the road again. Hoping it hadn't changed. Eventually, the mailbox appeared through the fog. Same lean, same rust, and beyond it and the road, but it wasn't right. The pavement was cracked more deeply now. Moss covered the center line. No sounds, no cars, no sky above the fog. I walked for an hour before the sound of my engine reached me. My car was parked where I'd left it, driver's door closed. Keys still in the ignition. I got in and drove. I didn't care what direction. At some point, I don't know how long, I passed a mile marker. 14. Then another. 13. When I hit the main highway, I pulled over and threw up. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't told anyone, but sometimes I still dream about that notebook. And every now and then, when the weather shifts and the clouds come low, through the trees I'll check my mirrors and swear I see that same cracked stretch of road behind me, like it's still waiting, like it's not done with me yet. It was nearly 2:40 in the morning when we saw the truck. Dan and I were heading back from a late shift at the mill outside Elkins, riding the usual stretch of Route 219 that cuts through Tucker County. That part of the mountains gets real dark at night, the kind of dark that eats headlights. Fog had been coming in and out all evening, clinging to the valleys real low and wet. The truck was sitting just off the shoulder near a gravel turnout. Headlights still on, engine running. Driver's door swung wide open. No one inside. Dan eased our truck to a crawl. That doesn't look right. I nodded. I'd seen breakdowns, deer hits, even a guy once trying to sleep off a bender. But something about this felt off. Too neat. No hazard lights. No movement. And that fog, it seemed thicker here, curling low around the tires like it was trying to climb inside. We pulled over a few feet ahead. Dan grabbed the flashlight from the glove box while I called out, "Hello? You all right?" No answer. The air was wet and cold when I stepped out. Smelled like pine needles and old dirt. I could hear the engine idling behind us, ticking faintly under the hood. The driver's seat was empty, wallet still on the dash, cell phone in the cup holder, a half-drunk bottle of water on the floor. Someone left in a hurry, Dan muttered, sweeping the flashlight toward the tree line. That's when we saw the footprints, clear in the soft mud leading away from the truck. Barefoot. Deep heel marks like the person had been moving fast. They led directly into the woods. We followed them, carefully. About 20 feet in, the prints just stopped. There wasn't even enough ground cover to hide them. No broken branches, no sign of turning around, just an abrupt end. One last step pressed into the moss. Then nothing, Dan said. Maybe they jumped off the trail, but there was no slope, no drop-off, just a flat patch of forest and rising fog. I crouched, ran my hand across the moss. It was cold, damp, undisturbed. Dan clicked off the flashlight for a second. The dark that settled was so complete, it felt physical. I said, "Let's head back." The truck was still idling when we returned, headlights casting a cone of yellow through the mist. I kept thinking, if someone ran into the woods, where were they now? No sound, no flashlight, no rustling, just silence. We called it in to county dispatch. They said someone would check it in the morning. No active missing persons. They told us we could leave. Dan shut the truck door but didn't start the engine. He looked back at the woods. "You ever feel like you're being watched?" "Only right now," I muttered. We drove home in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Not exactly. But because my brain kept replaying the scene, the stillness, the last footprint. How quiet it was, like the forest had swallowed someone whole without leaving a trace. I told myself it was probably just a guy who panicked, maybe ran off into the dark and got turned around. But even then, there should have been something. 3 days later, Dan went back. I didn't know until he called me. He said he'd driven past the same stretch and saw the truck was gone, but something about the spot still didn't sit right. He parked and walked the same trail in daylight. Said the footprints were barely visible now, rained over, but he followed where they'd gone, about 20 feet in. Then he went further. He found something. Not a body. A house. Old. Deep in the woods, barely visible from any path. He said it looked half collapsed from one side, porch sagging in. No tire tracks, no power lines, no mailbox. But someone had lived there once. He said it was only about a quarter mile in. I told him not to go inside, but he already had. The front door had been wedged shut with a broken axe handle. The inside smelled of wet wood and old paper, floorboards swollen from moisture. Most of the furniture was still there, a narrow bed, stove, bookshelf covered in mold. And on the wall, framed in a crooked old nail, was a photograph. Dan said it was of a man standing in front of that same cabin, probably 40 or 50, wearing a plain flannel shirt. Looked like it was taken in the 90s. But it was what was next to the man that stopped Dan cold, the truck. Same make, same color, same dent on the bumper, the one we'd found running on the roadside. Dan left. Fast. But he took a photo of the photo before he did. He sent it to me. I stared at it for a long time, the angle of the shot, the fog curling behind the tree line, the way the man in the picture looked like he was mid-step. Not posing. Caught. Later that night, I looked up property records. That stretch of land near Black Hollow had a few parcels grandfathered in from the 70s. Most were long abandoned. One listed owner, Wallace Wren, hadn't paid taxes since 2002. Registered address, unknown. The truck was registered to a man named Peter Wren. I don't know what that means. I went back a week later. Alone. I don't know why. Something about the trail kept tugging at my mind. I told myself I just needed to see it in daylight. Prove to myself it was just a freak moment, a barefoot hiker, a breakdown, nothing more. But when I reached the spot where the footprints had ended, the ground was dry, and there were new footprints. Barefoot again. Smaller this time. They ended just a few feet past the tree line. I didn't follow them. Instead, I walked back to where the truck had been parked. Just gravel now. But someone had placed a pile of stones there, a small stack, maybe 5 or 6. Moss-covered. Intentional. I didn't touch them. I've had dreams since. Not nightmares. Not exactly. Just strange, repeating ones. I'm walking down a foggy trail and there are footprints ahead of me. Always fresh, always just out of reach. But I never catch up. Dan doesn't talk about it anymore. Last time we spoke, he said, sometimes people disappear because they want to, but the guy with the truck hadn't taken his wallet, or his phone, or his shoes, and sometimes, late at night, I'll drive past that stretch of road on purpose, just to see if the fog's come back, just to check the gravel, just to make sure it hasn't started again. I used to laugh when people talked about the Vanish Strip. It's a stretch of Route 12 outside Carrick Hollow, narrow, winding, no shoulder, where folks claim cars just disappear. Not in a dramatic Hollywood way. Just gone. 1 second. They're ahead of you, then they're not. People say it's the fog, the curves, bad eyes, but they say it like they don't believe it either. I only started using that road after I moved back to Elkins last fall. My mom's health was slipping and I'd taken a night job cleaning offices just to make ends meet. I drove the hollow every night around midnight, tired, half-zoned. But that road always kept me awake. Steep slopes on one side, thick forest on the other. No streetlights, just that white line hugging the edge and your own headlights giving you 30 feet of faith at a time. It was late November when it happened. The fog had been patchy all night, hanging low in the valleys, heavier, near the creek crossings. I remember checking the dashboard clock. 12:14 a.m., I just crested a hill when I saw the taillights ahead. 2 small red dots in the fog. I hadn't seen anyone for the last 30 minutes, so it caught my attention. I slowed a bit. Stayed. Behind. The car kept a steady pace, not too fast. I could just make out its outline. An older sedan, dark-colored, maybe gray or navy blue. No plates that I could see. I stayed behind it for a mile or two. We passed the old iron mile marker, half-rusted, and barely standing. The same dead raccoon I'd seen the night before was still on the shoulder, more bloated now. But then, the taillights were gone. I didn't see them turn. No driveway. No bend. Just gone. I tapped the brakes. Coasted. I should have seen something. Tail end pulling off, even a flicker. But the road ahead was empty, straight for at least another quarter mile. Trees pressed close on both sides. I stopped the car, rolled down the window. Silence. No wind. No frogs. Just the faint hiss of my engine cooling and the wet smell of pine and moss and something deeper, damp wood, maybe rot. I got out, walked a few steps toward the ditch. There was no tire mark, no fresh break in the underbrush, nothing. The fog curled along the treetops, drifting low. My headlights cast long shadows across the gravel. I stood there a while, just listening. It felt like I'd missed something important, like I'd looked away at the wrong second, and the moment had slipped past me. I drove the rest of the way home slow, watching the mirrors. At some point, I realized I'd been gripping the wheel so hard my hands hurt. I didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? That a car vanished in front of me? That I chased ghosts through the fog? But I started taking a different route home. Longer, but well lit. I told myself it was safer with all the deer out that way. Still, the thought nagged at me. A week later, I went back during the day. It had rained that morning. The sky was low and pale, like stretched out wool. I parked where I thought it had, happened just past the iron mile marker, and walked the edge of the road. There was a narrow ditch on the right filled with dark water and rotted leaves. I followed it on foot, slipping on the wet ground. About 20 yards in, I noticed something. Not a trail exactly, but just a place where the brush looked bent back, like someone had forced their way through once a long time ago. I pushed in. The trees got dense fast. Everything smelled like mold and wet bark. The air was colder under the canopy. Then I saw it. A bumper, half buried under a collapsed branch and a blanket of moss. Rusted through, with no shine left. I stepped closer and realized the whole car was there. An old sedan, navy blue, windows shattered. Hood split open like a peeled can. It had been there a long time, but what stopped me cold was the shape of the taillights. Narrow, long, the same kind I'd followed. The plate was gone. No VIN. The interior was stripped, eaten by time and weather. But a few scraps were still inside. A torn receipt, a broken cassette, moldy cloth, and on the passenger seat a wallet. I picked it up. Dried leather curled at the edges. Inside was a license, faded but readable. Peter Hollis. I froze. That name was familiar. I didn't know him, not personally, but I remembered the flyers. He went missing a few years back. They said he vanished. On Route 12 near Carrick Hollow. No signs, no crash. Just gone. The wallet fell from my hand. I didn't hear a sound, but I felt something shift. Not in the trees. In me. Like I'd stepped into a place I wasn't meant to find. I walked back fast, heart thudding, every branch brushing my shoulder making me flinch. When I reached the road, I looked back. The trees looked normal. Just woods. Just fog. I didn't report the car, I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to pretend it wasn't real, that it was just some wreck I happened to stumble on. But that's not the truth. I saw taillights, I followed them, and they led me to something that had been buried for years. Now, when I drive alone, even on different roads, I sometimes catch them again in the distance. Two dim red dots floating ahead, steady and silent. I never follow anymore. But sometimes they don't wait to be followed. Sometimes they wait. I was 12 when Uncle Rob disappeared. He'd left my grandparents' place late one night after helping them patch a leaky roof. Said he was taking the short way back to Lewisburg, through Black Hollow Pass. That stretch of road is tight and winding, no shoulder, hemmed in by cliffs on one side and thick pines on the other. Dangerous when the weather turns. But it was dry that night. He never made it home. For weeks they searched. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers from the church combing the roadside ditches. Then they found his car. It was just a few yards off the road, tucked behind a downed tree like it had rolled in slow and settled there. Doors locked, headlights off, keys still in the ignition. No crash marks, no glass, no sign of impact. The tires weren't even flat. It was like someone had parked it there neatly, then vanished. But the part that stuck with me, what never left, was what the deputy told my dad. The seat's still warm. After that, nobody wanted to talk about it. Not really. My grandmother put his photo in a drawer. My dad went quiet anytime the hollow was mentioned. We never got answers. Just an empty driver's seat and the kind of silence that clings. I moved away after high school, tried not to think about any of it. But last fall, I came back. My dad had passed and I was the one stuck clearing out the cabin. It was tucked in a hollow about 15 minutes from where Rob's car was found. The place was rotting from the inside out. Damp floors, a roof like wet cardboard, the smell of dust and mildew that stuck to your clothes. I started with the attic. The boards creaked under my boots. Dust floated in the slanted light from a cracked window. Most of the boxes up there were junk. Old tools, newspaper clippings, tangled extension cords. But one box caught my eye. It had my uncle's name scrawled on the side in thick marker. Inside, a few notebooks, some faded Polaroids, a stack of yellowing receipts. There was also a road map, one of those big fold-out ones creased to hell with a red line traced in Sharpie. From the cabin to Carrick Hollow. right through the pass where he vanished. Next to the map was a short note, scribbled in pencil on a scrap of receipt paper. Fog comes in faster now. Something's off with that stretch. I drove it twice. Same turn, same mile marker, same truck. Broken down both times, that's all it said. I stood there in the attic holding that note, and the air felt heavier, like the dust had thickened around me. That night I couldn't sleep. So around midnight I drove out. I told myself I just wanted to see it, to stand where they found the car. Maybe it would help me let it go. The road through Black Hollow looked different at night. It always did. My headlights lit up damp tree trunks and sagging power lines, barely cutting through the fog pooling low on the pavement. I passed the broken mile marker around 12:40, the one that was always half buried in kudzu. That's where they'd found him. I pulled off and killed the engine. Stepping out, the air was thick and quiet. Just the soft hiss of wind through pine. No crickets, no traffic. Just the sound of my boots and wet gravel as I walked a few yards into the brush. There was a faint path, probably made by the search crews years ago. I followed it down, brushing branches aside until I reached a clearing, and there it was. The ground still held the faint imprint of tire tracks. Moss had crept in, but the shape remained, like the land hadn't forgotten. I stood there a while. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a feeling, maybe nothing. But something caught my eye. Half buried in the leaves was a keychain. Faded plastic, worn lettering. The name of the garage Rob used to work at. I crouched and picked it up. That's when I noticed the silence. Not just quiet, total. No wind, no trees shifting, like the woods were holding their breath. I turned around to head back, and that's when I saw it. Another set of tire tracks. Fresher, not Rob's. Same path, same angle, leading off into the brush about 10 feet further in. I followed them, heart beating too fast. They led to a car, covered in pine needles and mud, but newer, maybe 5 years old. The driver's door was open. Inside, everything looked normal. No blood, no damage. A half-empty soda bottle in the console, jacket tossed in the back, but the keys were still in the ignition, and the seat was warm. I backed out slowly, then turned and started walking fast back toward my car. My flashlight picked up every branch like a claw, every shadow like a figure. The road felt further away than it should have. When I finally reached my truck, I got in and locked the doors. My hands were shaking. I drove straight home. I didn't tell anyone. I buried the map, the receipt note, and the keychain in a box in the back of my closet. But I still think about it. About the look of the seat, slightly sunken, as if someone had just stood up. About the soda bottle still sweating from the cold. About how the tracks followed the same arc, like someone else took the same turn and vanished the same way. Sometimes I wonder if that stretch of road remembers people. Not in a ghost story way, more like a habit, a rhythm, like once something disappears a certain way, the land wants to repeat it. It was close to 1 a.m. when I passed through Briar Hollow, heading east toward Rainset. I'd driven that stretch maybe 50 times before. 2-lane blacktop slicing through the hills, hugging the edge of the tree line where fog moved slow and low like spilled breath. The town behind me was nothing more than a faded gas station and a post office that hadn't updated its hours since '98. I was tired, the kind of tired that makes your thoughts slip loose. That's when I saw him. Standing just past a sharp curve where the road dipped, right shoulder, thumb out. Flannel shirt, dirty jeans, head down. One hand in the pocket, the other pointed, toward the sky like he wasn't even trying that hard. I passed him before I fully registered what I'd seen. Reflex made me tap the brakes. I hadn't seen another soul on the road in over an hour. I stopped about 30 yards ahead. Watched him through the rear view. He didn't move at first. Then he started walking toward me. Slow, steady. I unlocked the door. He slid in without a word, the dome light catching the tired lines in his face. Probably late 40s, pale, damp hair clinging to his forehead. Smelled faintly of wet leaves. "Where? You headed?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Back east, over toward Mill Creek." "All right," I said. "I can take you a ways." He nodded once. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The fog thickened. I slowed down. The headlights cut a narrow tunnel through gray. He started giving quiet directions. "Left at the next split. Stay on the gravel when it turns. There's an old service road just ahead." Nothing strange, at first. People from towns like Briar Hollow know backways nobody else sees. He didn't ask much of me. Just the occasional turn, always in a calm, low voice. The road narrowed. Trees arched overhead like ribs. The sound of gravel beneath the tires turned steady and soft. Then, somewhere near a dip in the path, I felt it. The air shifted, the way it does when a storm is about to break, but the skies above were dry. Still, something pulled at me. A quiet awareness. I glanced at the passenger seat. It was empty. My heart kicked once, loud and hard. The door hadn't opened. The seatbelt was still buckled. I slowed to a stop right there in the road. My mouth was dry. I stared at the seat. The belt hung diagonally, clipped in, impossibly neat. My headlights lit up nothing but the road ahead. Two fading lines in the gravel stretching into trees I didn't recognize. I looked around. No footsteps in the dirt outside. No sound but the soft hiss of cooling brakes. I hit the dome light. The seat was dry, clean. No mark where someone had sat. No smudge on the dash. The kind of empty that made me question if anyone had been there at all. But I remembered his voice. Low. Calm. I remembered him saying Mill Creek. Saying Old Service Road. His hand gesturing at the turn. I pulled the truck forward and turned around carefully. On the way back, the road behind me looked wrong. Longer, faded, no more gravel, no split in the trees, no footprints, no town, just road. I didn't talk about it for a long time. Even now, I don't like to tell it straight. I say I got turned around, that I took a wrong exit outside Briar Hollow and ended up on a logging road. But every time I close my eyes, I hear the voice again. The way he said, "Stay on the gravel." I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, 2 weeks later, I drove back during the day, past the same gas station, still closed, same faded, fresh ice sign swinging in the wind. I looked for the turn I'd taken. Didn't see it. I parked and walked, the woods behind the road. Dipped into hollow ground, wet leaves everywhere, smelled like rot and pine sap. I searched for gravel, for a clearing, for anything. Found nothing, except for a rusted road sign buried under some brush. Mill Creek, 5 miles. The letters were faded, eaten through by weather and time. There was no road left, no path, just trees growing thick over something forgotten. Back in town, I asked the old guy at the feed store about Mill Creek. He said the area used to be accessible through a service road, but it was washed out years ago. Some logging route they shut down in the 80s after a landslide. "People still try to go up that way?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not if they know better." I almost left it at that. Almost. But the next week I got a message from a coworker. He'd heard I passed through Briar Hollow. Said his uncle went missing near there in '96. Said he was hitchhiking, headed toward Mill Creek. That stopped me cold. I asked him for details. He didn't have much, just that the man had been seen once, trying to catch a ride near a sharp bend outside town. Said he always wore flannel. That night I sat in my truck longer than usual before turning the key. When I finally looked at the passenger seat, I checked the belt. It was clipped in. I hadn't touched it, hadn't used it in weeks. And it was stretched across the seat like someone had just leaned back and buckled it. I unlatched it with shaking fingers. It clicked open easy. I waited, heart pounding, listening. Nothing, just my own breath, sharp and thin in the dark. But I didn't drive for a while after that. I still don't go near Briar Hollow. and I never stop for hitchhikers. Not anymore. It was supposed to be a quiet drive. Just me, headed back to Morgantown after visiting my aunt near Clay County. I'd taken the Ridge Highway, old Route 49, for the view. It snakes along the edge of the Appalachians, hugging rock walls and valleys that drop off into silence. No cell service for 30 miles, but the road was smooth and dry, and I'd driven it before. The weather had shifted halfway through. Fog rolled in like it was poured straight from a pitcher. Thick, low, clinging to the trees. I slowed down. My headlights cut about 10 feet ahead, no more. There weren't any cars behind me, none ahead. Then I saw the flares. 3 of them, burning low on the asphalt, casting that sharp, orange-red light. Next to them, a few reflective cones and a wooden detour sign hand-painted in block letters. The arrow pointed down a dirt path that disappeared into the trees. There were no signs of construction, no equipment, no crews. But the highway ahead was blocked with a barricade and a single strip of caution tape. Looked temporary, but real enough. I paused for a moment. The turnoff didn't look familiar. I didn't remember seeing it on the way in, but there was no room to turn around, and I didn't feel like backing up along a ridge in the fog. So I took the detour. The road narrowed fast. Mud replaced gravel. Trees leaned in. My tires sank into the ruts left behind by heavy wheels. Old logging traffic, maybe. I kept thinking I'd see another sign. Maybe some indicator it would loop back to the highway. But there was nothing. Just the occasional scrap of orange ribbon tied to a tree branch. Then the fog got worse. It was like driving inside a cotton ball. My mirrors were useless. No sound but the steady thrum of the engine and the low hum of tires over mud. I drove for what felt like 20 minutes, then 30. The path narrowed further. I hadn't seen a ribbon in a while. No intersections, no tire tracks besides my own. Stopped the car, cut the engine. Silence. I rolled down the window. The air smelled wet, not just like rain, but like rot, like old leaves left to sit, something deep and sour beneath the surface. That's when I realized I couldn't hear birds. Or bugs, no wind, just silence. I turned the key. Nothing happened. The engine cranked once, then quit. Tried again. Nothing. My stomach turned. I sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel hard like that would anchor me to something real. Then I got out. The mud squelched under my boots. I stepped a few paces down the road. No lights, no houses, no fences. Just dark forest and fog curling around the trunks like smoke. And then I heard something, faint behind me, a click. Like a door latch. I spun around. My car door was closed. I was certain I hadn't shut it, but there it was, latched tight, no dome light, no sound. I didn't move for a long time, just stared at the car. Eventually, the engine started. I don't know what changed. I turned the key again, mostly out of desperation, and the dashboard flickered to life. I didn't wait. Just threw it into drive and started back the way I'd come. But the road was different. I know that sounds impossible, but the ruts were gone. The tracks I'd made vanished. The trees felt denser. The fog pressed in thicker. I followed the eye, turns by instinct, trying to retrace where I'd gone. But every bend looked like the last. Every dip in the road the same soft curve. I began to second guess. I drove slower. Checked the clock. It was 3:17 a.m. Somewhere along the way I passed an old shack, just a blur through the trees but enough to catch the shape. A tin roof collapsed on one side. A broken fence around it. It hadn't been there earlier. I stopped the car and reversed, rolled to a crawl. Through the fog, I could see more clearly now. It wasn't just a shack. It looked like someone had lived there long ago. Half of the porch was sunken in. The door hung crooked on its hinges. I don't know why I got out. I think I just wanted something real to orient myself. Something that would prove I hadn't driven in a circle or lost my mind. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and rust. A narrow bed frame, empty jars lined up along the sill, broken dishes in the sink. The floor was soft beneath my boots, water-damaged boards that groaned like old bones. There was a small table in the corner. On it, a notepad, pages stuck together with mildew. I peeled one up and squinted at the words, smudged pencil and blocky writing. If you found this, don't follow the markers. Underneath, they change it. That's all it said. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how loud my breath sounded in the cabin. Outside, the fog had thickened. I got in my car, turned it around, and drove without thinking. I don't know how long. It took maybe 40 minutes, maybe longer. But eventually the road widened. The trees thinned. I hit pavement. And then, the highway. I pulled over in disbelief. I was back on the ridge, but the flares were gone. No cones, no sign, just clean. Road stretching both directions. It was like nothing had ever been there. I checked the map on my phone once I had a signal. The path I took didn't exist. No service road, no junction, no trails, even unofficial ones. I don't tell people the story straight. They wouldn't believe me anyway. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and I see roadwork ahead, especially near the hollows, and I get this tight feeling in my chest, and I check for the markers to make sure they're real, and I never ever take a detour I don't recognize. Not anymore. It was late October, and I was driving through the Blue Hollow stretch, just outside a place called Dunmore. That part of the Appalachian range gets a kind of silence to it. Dense woods, fog that hangs even on dry mornings. Towns tucked so far, back you blink and miss them. I just crossed the last gas station 20 miles behind me when the storm hit. It wasn't the kind that creeps up. It fell like a dropped sheet of water, thunder shaking the trees, wind pushing the rain sideways. Visibility gone in seconds. I eased off onto a turnout I knew from previous drives, just a gravel pad carved into the mountain, barely wide enough for 2 cars. Tall pines leaned over it, and in the summer you could see hawks riding the thermals over the valley below. But now it was just fog and dark and pounding rain. That's when I noticed the other car. It was parked about 40 feet ahead. A gray sedan, older, boxy, covered in pine needles. I hadn't seen it as I pulled in, but it was there, angled slightly toward the guardrail. Its windows were all fogged. I cut my engine and left the radio on low. Just static and faint voices from some distant station. The storm wrapped around, the truck like a blanket. For a moment, it felt like I was the only person on the mountain. Then the lightning came, just one strike, white and sharp, and it lit the turnout for maybe half a second. That was all. But in that flicker, I swear, I saw a silhouette in the driver's seat of that sedan, head turned toward me. By the time my eyes adjusted, it was gone. The next flash didn't come for another minute. I waited, watching the car, no movement. I rolled my window down an inch. Rain blew in sideways. I cupped my hand to my mouth and shouted, "You all right in there?" Nothing. I waited a few more minutes. The rain eased off slightly, enough that I felt I could step out without being soaked through. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight and walked toward the car. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air smelled sharp, wet bark ozone and something else underneath, faint but sour, like turned soil. I approached the driver's side window and knocked gently. No response. I clicked the flashlight on and angled it in. Empty. No keys, no coat, no personal items. The seats were pristine, no moisture, no fog on the inside anymore, and that smell, stronger now, like the car had been sitting in a basement for years, dry but ancient, like earth trapped in wood, the kind of smell you get in root cellars and long-abandoned barns. I tried the door. Locked. The back seat was clean, too. No garbage, no papers, nothing. I stood there, rain dripping from the bill of my cap, the silence between thunder growing longer. There was no reason for that car to be there. No reason for it to be empty. I walked around the sedan once more. The tires were firm, but the wheel wells had dried leaves packed into them. Old ones, brittle, pale, like the kind that settle over time, not from a single windy day. That didn't line up. The rain had only started an hour ago, and then I noticed something that made my chest tighten: the footprints. Just a few in the gravel behind the driver's door. Not new, faint, pressed shallow. Maybe 3 steps, and then they vanished. No path leading away, no marks in the mud beyond. Like someone had stepped out and never moved again. I backed away slowly, got back in my truck, turned the heat up, and sat. I watched the sedan from the mirror. Didn't blink much. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper on the windows. The air in the truck felt too tight. Rolled down the window slightly for air. That's when I heard it. A single thud from the sedan, like a soft fist against glass. I turned quickly. Nothing. Still. No lights, no movement. I told myself it was a branch. That's all. The storm began to move east. The fog pulled back just a little, giving the mountain its shape again. I started the engine and eased out of the turnout. As I passed the sedan, I didn't look directly at it, but from the corner of my eye, I noticed something I hadn't before. The driver's seatbelt. It was clipped in, flat against the seat, like someone had been there not long ago and simply vanished without unbuckling. I drove faster after that, didn't stop again until I hit Elkins. I checked in at a cheap motel just off the highway, slept maybe 2 hours, then left before dawn. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the rain, the lightning, the stress, it made things blurry, a trick of the eye. A parked car, abandoned. Nothing more. That was 4 months ago. I haven't driven that route since. But last week, a friend of mine, a forest tech with the state, mentioned an odd detail on a survey report. They'd found a car off the turnout on Route 49 locked. Dry. Inside smelled like earth, and the seatbelt still buckled. I'd known Tyler since 6th grade. We met over a dropped PB&J sandwich and became inseparable after that. Grew up together in Braxton County, joined the same welding crew out of high school, split beers every Friday night down at Harmon's. Dick here. Last time I saw him, we were loading gear into his trunk outside the shop. He had a gig up near Burkett's Fork, small mountain town barely clinging to the map. He was subcontracting 2 days' worth of welds on a water tower. Said he'd be back by Saturday. He never made it home. When his phone went dead, we figured he'd just lost service. When he missed Sunday, we figured he was blowing off steam somewhere. But Monday morning came, and Tyler's truck still hadn't shown up. His mom reported him missing that afternoon. A week later, his dash cam showed up in a brown envelope outside the sheriff's office. No note, just the unit. Sheriff Hughes showed us the footage. Me, Tyler's brother, and 2 deputies crowded around an old desktop in the back of the station. The timestamp said 12:42 a.m. The footage starts with Tyler yawning behind the wheel, driving slow, fog rolling in. The road looks paved but narrow. No lines, no shoulder. Then the trees start closing in. Thick trunks on either side, branches over the top like a tunnel. His headlights barely light more than 15 feet ahead. The trees get tighter. You can hear the scrape, bark against metal. Tyler slows to a crawl. His voice off camera says something like, "Did I miss a turn?" Then the headlights catch something. A sudden flat shape. Gray, jagged, like a rock wall across the road. Then the footage cuts to black. That was it. No impact sound. No brakes, no skid. Just the image of the rock, then nothing. We went quiet after that. The dashcam had GPS, but the coordinates were off. Glitched somehow. No matches to any mapped road. Sheriff Hughes said it might be corrupt data. They never found the truck. No signs. No tire marks. Just gone. The next week, I took a couple days off work. I kept thinking about that footage. The shape of that rock face. The tight curve of the road. The fog crawling in. I remembered Tyler's route. He was cutting through Little Wolf Hollow. Locals say it used to be a mining access road, now overgrown. Not technically closed, just forgotten. No cell service, no traffic. So I went looking. Packed water, flashlight, first aid. Not because I expected to find him. I don't know what I expected. The entrance to Little Wolf Hollow was marked by a bent road sign, barely legible under moss. The pavement was cracked, flaked with patches of gravel and soft dirt. The woods leaned in on both sides. It looked like the video. Exactly. I drove slow. Trees pressed close. Fog hung low, even in daylight. No birds, no crickets. Just the steady thrum of tires and the occasional tick of pebbles under the chassis. I started to notice the road narrowing, not drastically. Just a few inches every 100 yards. Subtle, but real. The branches above me wove tighter, like ribs closing in. My side mirrors brushed pine needles. I stopped, got out, walked ahead. The road disappeared into fog about 30 feet on. The air was heavy, cold, smelled like wet bark, old stone and something sour beneath it. I walked forward. 20 paces in, the tree trunks grew thicker, not just tall, but wide, older than anything I'd seen in the area. Their roots cracked through the pavement, twisting like bones through skin. Then I saw it, just ahead. A flat surface where the road should have kept going. Gray, uneven, covered in moss. Rock. I stopped. It wasn't a cliff. It wasn't part of the ridge. It was as if something had laid a slab across the road, sealing it off, like it had always been there. I stepped closer. No tire marks, no broken branches, nothing. But on the shoulder, in the dirt beside the rock, something caught the light. Strip of rubber, thin, torn, blackened, tire shavings. I knelt. Next to it was something else, half buried in the dirt, a small piece of plastic. I wiped it clean. It was the end cap from a phone charger, the kind Tyler always kept plugged into his dash. My chest went cold. I looked back at the car. It was maybe 50 feet behind me now, swallowed in mist. The trees had shifted somehow, closer. I could see moisture running down their trunks like sweat. I turned back to the rock. There were no seams, no cracks to suggest movement. But it hadn't been there before. Not always. It was recent. The color didn't match the cliff faces nearby. The moss hadn't spread fully across it. I pressed my hand to it. Cold, damp, the kind of cold that soaks into your palm. And for a second, just a breath, I thought I felt something behind it. Not movement, not sound, just pressure, like standing on the edge of a tunnel that breathes once every hour. I don't remember walking back to the car, just getting in, slamming the door, and not letting go of the wheel until I was back on real pavement. I didn't tell the sheriff, didn't tell Tyler's family. What would I say? That the road narrowed and the woods swallowed him? That something waited in the hollow, not something living, not something dead, but a place that didn't want to be found. I just told them I didn't see anything. I still drive the same highway. I still pass the turnoff to Little Wolf Hollow, but I don't look at it anymore. I keep my eyes forward, and when the fog comes in, slow and low, I grip the wheel and keep driving, because I saw the end of that road and I know it's still waiting. I took the back route through Alder Ridge because I didn't want to think. My dad had just passed the week before. Lung cancer, quick and brutal. I'd spent the better part of a month in his hospital room, and when it was all over, I couldn't face the house just yet. So I packed up the truck and headed south through the mountains, hoping the quiet would help me clear my head. That stretch, between Elkins and some forgotten dot of a town called Partridge Run, was supposed to take 2 hours. My map app showed a shortcut through the hills, a 2-lane blacktop road with no name, just a dotted gray line that dipped between valleys and ridges like thread pulled tight. It was late afternoon when I saw the sign. Faded wood, barely legible letters painted in red, "Stop, turn around." It was nailed crookedly to a leaning fence post just before the road narrowed into dense pines. I slowed down, but didn't stop. I actually laughed a little, the kind of short, dry laugh. That doesn't mean anything. I'd seen signs like that before, prank, old warning. Maybe even leftover from a washed-out road. Still, I remember gripping the wheel a little tighter as I passed it. The forest swallowed the truck not long after. Tall trees on both sides, branches woven overhead, turning the daylight into a murky, green haze. The pavement was cracked and glossy from last night's rain. The kind of road you expect to see tire tracks on, but I didn't. No signs of life, no houses, no mailboxes, no deer, nothing. Just asphalt and pine needles and that sound tires make when they roll over damp leaves. I kept thinking I'd hit an intersection soon. The road had to cross back into the main route eventually, but it didn't. I drove for over an hour without seeing another car. That's when I reached for my phone. The screen lit up for a second, a flicker of battery, then black. I tried again. Nothing. Not even the dead battery icon. Just cold glass and a faint static hiss through the speakers before silence. I glanced at the dashboard clock. It was blinking. Then it reset. 00. That's when I started to feel it. Not fear exactly. More like a slow awareness that something wasn't adding up. I'd been driving too long. The road should have hit a town by now. A gas station, a farmhouse, anything. I checked the fuel gauge, 3/4 full. I pulled over for a minute, engine idling, and rolled the window down. The forest outside was still. No wind, no bird sounds. Just the faint ticking of the engine cooling. I stepped out. The air smelled like pine, damp bark, and something underneath, faint and sour, like wet stone. I looked behind me. The road curved, out of sight, swallowed by trees, no sign, no fence post, nothing. I got back in the truck, turned it around, and drove the way I'd come. After 30 minutes, I saw nothing I recognized. Not the sharp bend near the creek, not the ridge I passed earlier. It all looked the same, like the same 100 yards of road stretched out endlessly in both directions. I stopped again, shut the engine off, and waited. The silence pressed in thick. I remember thinking, what if the sign wasn't a joke? What if I was already too far past where I was supposed to stop? I slept in the truck that night. Not well. Just short stretches of shallow sleep between waves of dread. Every time I opened my eyes, I expected to see someone, or something, standing just beyond the tree line. But there was nothing. Just fog. It had rolled in thick sometime before, dawn. By the time I sat up and started the engine, it was like driving through wet wool. My headlights barely cut through it. I kept going anyway. Every turn felt like one I'd already taken. Same slope, same patch of cracked pavement, same broken branch on the side of the road. At some point, I passed a yellow road reflector half buried in the dirt. The same one I remembered seeing yesterday. Same tilt, same scuff mark. I marked it this time. Got out and laid a can from my glove box next to it. Drove for 40 minutes. Passed it again. Same can, unmoved. That's when it clicked. I wasn't driving in circles. Not in the traditional sense. There were no loops, no cross paths. It was a single stretch of road that kept repeating. Not physically maybe, but experientially. Like a track skipping the same second of music. I pulled over again and screamed at the trees. Nothing answered. Later, I walked into the woods. Not far, just 10 yards in. The ground was soft with moss. Trees stood thick and straight, no undergrowth. Just bark and shadow and silence. I left a mark, a carved X on a tree with my pocket knife. Walked back to the road, drove forward, stopped again and stepped off. The same tree, same X. Not possible. I started driving faster. No care for the curves, windows down, radio off. Just me and the noise of tires on pavement. At some point the fog thinned, and I saw something ahead. The sign, the same one from before. Stop. Turn around. But this time it wasn't nailed to a post. It was lying in the road. Splintered. Wet. like someone had thrown it there as a last-ditch warning. I drove past it anyway, because I didn't know what else to do. I found a road 2 hours later, a real one, lined, smooth, with traffic signs and telephone poles. I don't remember how I got there. The memory of the exit is a blur. One moment I was in trees. The next I was merging onto Route 50. I never found that stretch of road again. I tried. I went back a month later, searched all through Alder Ridge. Locals shrugged, said that side of the mountain hasn't had a through road in years, washed out back in the 80s. I asked about a warning sign. No one had heard of it. But I remember. It was the faded red paint, the crooked lettering, the way the word stop looked hand-painted, like someone made it not to scare people, but to beg them. I didn't listen. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving home through fog, I still glance in the mirror, expecting to see that endless stretch of road creeping back behind me, waiting.